Welcome to Uncut with Lucia. My name is Lucia Matuonto, and welcome back to the RV Book Fair 2022. And I want to introduce you to my host.
Oh, hello, and I'm Pat Backley. And as Lucia said, I'm coming from New Zealand, hence the background. Actually, that's not strictly true. I tried to have the RV background, but it made my eyes look white, and we decided that would be far too scary for you all. So I've just gone with this like wintry dark sky because I'm coming from tomorrow. Anyway, I'm Pat Backley, and today we're meeting with three amazing women authors to discuss inner power. First, we have Marleta Black. I hope I've pronounced that properly.
Yes,
Um,
okay.
Author of Say Something. Thank you for joining us, Marleta.
Thanks for having
Would
me.
you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself, perhaps? Just very
Um,
briefly.
yeah, so very briefly, I am a IT professional turned author and psychologist. That's in a nutshell. So I
Wow.
bring all that comes with that. And I currently practice as a life coach. So that is my passion, helping people through life transitions and communication that's required for those transitions. So
It's fabulous. Thank you.
thank you.
Lucia.
Yes, please give a warm welcome to Wendy Lee Baldwin. Wendy is the author of Healing Your Soul in a Chaotic World. So, welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. Likewise. And last but certainly not least, we have Tony Award-winning actress and director Tonya Pinkins, who published her book Red Pill Unmasked. Thank you for being here, Tonya.
So may I introduce myself? So
Yes.
my name is Tonya Pinkins. I'm a brown woman. I've got dyed gray hair with black roots. I'm wearing a white shirt with embroidery on it, and I have a blurred background. And I am actually in the land of the Nagabe, the Bugle, the Guna, the Embera, the Wuan, the Bribri, and the Nasojerdi people in Panama.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. What a wonderful heritage.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So let's start this panel by getting to know you better and your careers. The three of you have very different backgrounds. So, Malita, you are a business and personal coach. How did you get into this?
So I came up through the corporate world, and so I was exposed to, all the communication that comes from being in kind of an oppressive, and dare I say oppressive environment. I consider it oppressive now because I work for myself now. Um, but I learned so much about process and good, clear communication so that IT projects would go well. And um, in the very early 2000s, September 11th had a big impact on me. I broke away and began to work for myself, and I began to work as a small business coach working for a psychologist I knew. And I just deeply loved that work. And so, fast forward through various attempts to break away from the corporate world, I finally did it in moving to the USA in 2016. And I broke fully into being an entrepreneur and all that that meant, the good and the bad. And so that's where I am today. I practice as a life coach. I became a psychologist, went back to school, and that was inspired by life is too short, people. Like that was inspired by things happen around us, and we've learned again that life is short. So do what you need to do in this life that you have. So.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of my things I say all the time. In fact, when my daughter was growing up, I used to say to her, "You must do this, darling, because life is too short." Now that she's 28 years old, she says to me, "Mum, you're so right. Life is too short." So I love to hear you say that. That's great. Thank you. Wendy Lee, you're a healing guide. Now I get to learn more about you, which is great. Wendy, you're a healing guide. How did you get into this field?
in short, to save myself, to save my life. I was in my 40s, and had developed a lot of different physical problems. I also was suffering from anxiety and depression. And I went to a couple doctors, and because I had a lump on my thyroid about the size of a baby carrot, looked like it was lodged sideways. And different doctors told me that I was fine. And I said, I'm not fine. I said, I'm gaining weight, sleeping up to 2 hours a day. I'm too young to feel this old. And thankfully, my SOS to the universe was heard, and I was introduced to a beautiful soul who led me down the path of holistic healing. And my first session with that person opened up the whole pathway of worthiness. I didn't know that I deserved to be loved and to be whole and to have what it was that I desired. And that included good health. And she introduced me to other people. My first experience with this one particular modality, within 6 weeks, the lump was gone and I was down 40 pounds. And after that, I was hooked. And because what happened is I started learning about the body-mind connection, how we make ourselves sick through our emotions. And my insides, I was an absolute disaster. And so since I got hooked, I've always been somebody that people come to me for, they lay their problems on me. They want somebody to, a shoulder to cry on. And as I was learning different modalities to heal myself, I also stepped into that role of being a holistic healer because I was seriously hooked. And I said, this is my calling. I've been an entrepreneur since I was in the first grade. The very first thing I did is I picked a neighbor's flower, rang their doorbell, and sold it back to them. And ever since then, I've been, pawning something, having garage sales, selling apples, selling walnuts. It's always something that I've been doing. And so this was like my calling. And I see all my previous experiences that gave me the strength to do what I do, because it takes a lot of courage to step up into the arena and be different. And so that's basically it. And it's been amazing. It's been a beautiful path.
Can I just say, I know, Lucia, it's your turn, but I just want to say thank you so much, Wendy, because that's really inspiring. I think we are all the sum total of our lives so far, aren't we?
Yes.
Everything that's happened to us has made us the people we are. So I just love hearing other people's stories and how they've got to be where they are today. So thank you. Sorry, Lucia, your turn.
No problem. Thank you again also. And Tonya, you are a creative with a prolific background in theater, television, and also film. Of course, film, The Red Pill. How did it happen?
Yeah. So I'm from Chicago, and my mother had me when she was 14. And so I kind of grew up like a sister to her. And unbeknownst to me, when I was growing up, my mother was schizophrenic. And so what I grew up with as normal was just not what normal was. I didn't learn that she was schizophrenic until I was an adult. And so, of course, then I worried about, was I going to be crazy? Because what is crazy? But, she was really smart and she could do all kinds of things. And then she would, have these periodic psychotic breaks. So, growing up in that kind of chaotic world where you just never knew if she was going to be nice or if she was going to be violent, I was very shy and always just trying to be invisible, to not get in trouble. And one of my teachers kind of became a mentor for me, and he was the person who was getting me into doing the business. He would go and get me scholarships to acting school and scholarships to dance school, and get me auditions for shows. And I just always thought it was like, some lucky thing. And even after I'd done Broadway shows and stuff, I just sort of felt like this was something that was just being gifted to me. I didn't feel I didn't know what I had to do with it. So in my 20s, after having done Broadway and TV, I went back and studied and got what I would call a craft under my belt that made me feel like I could do this thing. And I'd say menopause was really like this life-changing thing for me, because I suddenly realized that all my life I'd been kind of raised to be a tool, and I'm a really good tool. Like, you hire me to do something and I am going to work my butt for you. I'm going to build a castle for you. And now that I'm like 60, I'm like, okay, well, what about your own castle? And so I've just now started to realize that I've always been what you are, Wendy, but I didn't know it. So instead of being my own entrepreneur, I was building other people's castles. And so as little time as we have, with the little time I have left, I made a movie, I produced a bunch of plays, I designed a game to my movie, I wrote the book Red Pill Unmasked, and I've taken on a bunch of other producing and writing projects because there's not that much time. And so I want to get them all done.
That is so
Yes.
inspiring, so wonderful. And I could just feel myself smiling all the time you were talking, because our paths have been very similar. I mean, I'm 71 and I only became an author 2 years ago, just before my 70th birthday. And I've spent my whole entire life building up men's empires and neglecting my own. And now my husband of 26 years dumped me 4 years ago. So now I'm building my own empire. And it's so empowering. You just feel like, oh, why did I not do this years ago? So I think as women, we're incredibly strong, aren't we? But we seem to have to go through an awful lot of heartache before we realize how strong we are. Anyway, enough about me. Common theme. While the three of you have completely different expertise, you all speak about inner power and finding your voice, which obviously I've preempted a bit. Marleta, your book is called Say Something. Can you quickly tell us a bit more about it, please?
Yeah, so I wrestled with the title for a long time, but ultimately in the work that I do and in the interactions with people who are frustrated with each other in their communication, there's often a point that they get to where someone says all they need to say, and then they wait for the other person to respond. And in the absence of that response, they're often found yelling out or screaming out, say something, which is your frustration that you're not being matched well in your communication or your energy or your intention. So I really gravitated to that title because, and now I hear it everywhere I go, but I do hear people say, I need to say something, or why don't you say something, or something to that effect. So the title came from there, and then the subtitle came from using a theme of an adventure, a very significant adventure hike, to think of communication with others as an adventure instead of a chore, or instead of a burden, or instead of this horrible thing that always goes wrong. Think of it as something you could prepare yourself to do better, more effectively. And as women, I'm sure we've all broken away from something else we no longer want to do. And so a lot of my book is, from my own walking away from things I no longer want to spend my own energy on or do, or engage in, give my emotional support to. So it's a little bit of my story, but it's often the client's stories, teaching them to say something and identify what they'd like to say. That's where it came from.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And sorry, Lucia. Poor Lucia. I keep butting in when it's her turn. I'm very sorry, but I just feel the urgent need to say something.
I love that to talk. But
it's just so, I think I find, and I'm sure you're all the same, the more people I interact with in life, the more similarities I realize we women have. We may not have been through exactly the same things, but we've all experienced great difficulties in our lives in many ways. I mean, just being a woman is hard, particularly in America. After this dreadful abortion thing, I put a post on everywhere about my feelings about it. Oh my goodness, two definite sides. And I just really felt for you women in America, because it's just such a huge backward step, isn't it? But anyway, I won't go on about that. Tonya, oh sorry, Lucia, it's your turn. Your turn.
So I feel the same. I agree completely with you and with Pat as well. When Tonya was telling about not really thinking that she was responsible for all that she was building, but like thinking that it was just lucky. And sometimes we even have this imposter syndrome. And also as Marleta were telling also, we need to say something, because when we keep things inside, it of course will become something serious, disease, depression. And also, I just have a question for you, Marleta. You found psychology later in life. Why did you choose this career?
I think initially I wanted to be an organizational psychologist. I was gravitating in my IT project work toward the org psychs that would come on site and work with the project and help us do our change management. So I became a change manager, and I just really just found myself sitting at their feet, learning how are we going to present this idea? How are we going to get adoption of this idea? And so I initially wanted to be an org psych. But I then did a Master of Divinity degree. I studied religion, mostly for my spiritual development. And I did a pastoral care course in that degree, where I really was asked some questions about, family systems work, which I love. Like, the work I do now is all in family business and generational family business, or couples. And so I really realized the lights were just going off in my passion about speaking about this particular family. And so that I thought, maybe counseling is really where my heart is, where my purpose is. And so I started to go back to school halfway through the MDiv, and I just adored everything about the clinical side of counseling. And so I got my clinical degree. I practice here as a life coach in the USA, but in Australia I can practice in mental health because of my licensing there. But I just really found my home, and the imposter syndrome went away. And so when you know that you'll do it all day for free, and not that I'm going to do it all day for free, but when you know you can, when you forget the clock and you forget the time and you are in flow 90% of your day, you have found your home. This is what you're supposed to be doing. I feel the same with writing. When I'm writing, I'm just in this place of magic. So I don't regret not starting earlier, because I don't think I had the maturity, the emotional maturity, or the voice to really be good at it when I was young. I think I needed to go through all these compressed things where I would find, my ability to crawl inside a story and help someone else. So it happened the way it's supposed to happen, but I'm glad it did.
Yep, I agree.
Yes, thank you. And Wendy, you help people find courage to step into their power. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
The courage to step into your power. It's really easier, more in our comfort zone, just to go along and to stay silent and to be more subservient. And it takes a lot of courage to stand up and say, hey, I have a voice. How I feel matters. What I have to say matters. And my hope is to be a guiding light for people, because I grew up one of the most shy people that I ever met. I used to be so shy that I would hide behind my dad's leg until I got taller than him. I'm considerably taller than my dad. And so I had to find my voice, and I had to find my personal power. And that's what I'm hoping that people get from my book, is to see that it is possible. And it's time for us women, especially, to come together and to find our voice and to find our power, because we are the way showers. We are the people that are going to heal our world. And it all starts with us.
Exactly.
Amen. I couldn't agree more.
I'd love to respond to Wendy and Marleta about say something and finding your voice. I also have some lumps in my thyroid, and an organ I didn't know about until this happened to me was something called the parathyroid. And various doctors were like, well, we've got to go in there and we've got to cut, and we can't find the tumor, and we have to cut in multiple places to look for it, and because we're cutting along the vocal cord, you may lose your voice, or your voice may change. Now, I'm a singer, and so I said to them, if I lose my voice or my voice changes, I'm not going to want to be alive. So you're telling me this condition I have is terminal and it could kill me, and I'm like, I would rather die than not have a voice. And so one day I was in someone's office, and there was a book in the lobby where I was waiting, and it was a Lakota medicine man from Canada, and I can't remember his name, but I had been thinking about sort of the Louise Hay method of, you need to speak. You've got something in your throat. There's something you're not saying. And in the opening chapter of his book, it was about what are the voices in your head that you always say to yourself. And as soon as I thought of that, the voice that was always in my head was, shut up. Why do you always have to say what you think? Just shut up. Just shut up. And I realized that's what I was doing. I was, shutting myself up.
And I have to tell you something also. I have Hashimoto thyroiditis, that it's from, something, the thyroids. And I was raised by a father who was very, he used to say, you have to be very polite. You cannot say no. You have to be nice to people. So my entire life, I was just saying yes. So I got to a point that I had a huge lump on my throat, and then I had to have a surgery. But I believe that if we keep everything here, something will have to happen. So this needs to go out. Sometimes when don't, we develop many, many problems, health problems.
Yeah, can I just, since we're on that subject, can I just share a little bit? I'm so happy for you, Tonya, that you are seeking alternatives. I mean, bless modern medicine, it is so important when we really need it, but there are so many alternatives out there. And I love that you are exploring and maybe that connection, acknowledge that you're telling yourself to shut up. For myself, I had so much rage and hate right here. And, like you were saying, Lucia, you're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to be nice. You're not supposed to express anything beyond what's socially acceptable. And we women are so suppressed. It's amazing that more of us don't have lumps on our throats because we've been taught to basically shut up, and we can't shut up anymore. But it's time to speak that voice. And I don't know if you're completely healed now, Tonya, from your throat and everything. But for anybody listening to this, give yourself permission to speak. What you can do is very simply be somewhere where you're by yourself, preferably, so you're not interrupted, and put your hands on your throat chakra and just ask your voice, what is it that needs to come out? And just let it come out unfiltered. And you might be surprised. I was horrified at how much rage and hatred was in my body. Here's sweet little Wendy, filled with this rage, and was all mostly here. I mean, I stuffed in other parts of my body that became sick, but yes, that the throat that's a very simple thing that you can do. Give yourself permission to ask your body, because your body is always speaking. You just got to ask it the right questions. They say the healing is in the feeling. It's also in asking the right questions. So ask your body, what is it that I need to speak? And, like for you, Tonya, it was you're telling yourself to shut up. Everybody has that thing that they're telling themselves. And yes, it's all about the mind connection too. You have that neural pathway. You kept telling yourself that, it just became a way of life. And we get to stop doing that.
Amen.
Yeah, for the, was saying, life is so short. So for the 6 years that I was living with this terminal illness, I felt like I could die at any moment, and I need to be complete. I need to feel like every day is a good day to die. So I developed this practice of, if I thought of somebody, I called them, saying what I needed to say, doing what I needed to do. And, 6 years into it, I finally, went and met a doctor, and this is how I picked him. We have a conversation, and now I've met like all the best surgeons in New York City, the people who work on the opera singers. No endocrinologist will see me because they're demanding that I have surgery immediately. And I'm like, no. And I finished talking to him, and I'm like, okay, he seems okay. And he has this 3D model of the throat on his desk. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, oh, some doctors have a hard time visualizing the inside of their patients' bodies before they start cutting, so that they know what to expect. And so I use this as a teaching tool. And I was like, you can do that? He said, yes. I was like, okay, you're my doctor. And so he had to remove a tumor from here, up here, and a tumor from down below my collarbone on the other side. And it's just this little tiny, not even an inch wide cut that he made to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I waited and trusted, and the spirit said, this is the one for you right here.
And you got to singing.
And I got to sing. And what I realized is that 6 years of living with a terminal illness, I hadn't been making plans, and that there was this weight that lifted off of me. And within a year and a half of that surgery, I wrote, directed, produced the movie Red Pill. I wrote the book Red Pill Unmasked about the whole process of getting to that. I produced 21-act plays by and about women. All of that creative energy was sitting in there waiting for me to feel like I could, like there was time, for that to happen.
Good for you.
Yeah. Waiting for you to speak your voice.
And isn't it wonderful that A, that we've all managed to do that, and B, that we've met? Because when you get a group of women together like this, it's an incredibly strong thing. It just makes you realize that we women could run the world, and we do a much better job of it than all these wretched men. It's just sad that it takes us so long to get to that point of being strong enough to find our voice, which leads me on to the next question. Tonya, you constantly speak up for people who don't often get the chance to have a microphone and say what they really think. How did you get the courage to do that? Because to stand up for what you believe is one thing, but to actually make a platform for other people's beliefs to be aired is a wonderful thing.
It's something I've been doing for as long as I can remember. And I think part of it was that I couldn't speak up for myself in my household. It was like violently, would risk death, but I could do it for other people. And so I remember when I was 7 years old, I saw some kids doing something very inappropriate with some younger children. And I just knew it was wrong. And I was one of the kids, and I went and brought some adults to stop it. And it, caused this terrible rift in this community where people stopped speaking to each other because it happened to be Black people and white people and who was doing what to these little white children. It was a horrible thing. But for me, it was right. And even though those consequences were unfortunate, that sense of having done right was so clear in my body and being that the consequences felt worth it. And so I feel like I'm constantly taking that hit for people who don't have the voice. I often will speak up about things that aren't even my issue because I know how hard it is for people. But because I have survived the ostracization so many times, I'm like, okay, you'll be taken care of. You can do this. That's your place in the world. You do that.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
And now for Marleta. So as you mentioned before, some of us assume others don't want to hear what we have to say. So why do you think that is? Why we have to always be worried about what people...
I think it comes from our upbringing. I was raised by somebody with Asperger's, right? And I didn't learn that till much later. So I was always being told, be sweet, be nice. And I've come to learn now that I am actually a nice person. I've come to learn that those childhood labels put on me because of someone else's filter, like Tonya, perhaps being labeled as a tattletale, or with me being labeled as not so sweet sometimes because I would speak the truth to grown people, whether they could handle it or not. And I think we have those childhood experiences that shut us down, that clam us up temporarily. I firmly believe it comes out in the wash in the end. I'm 58 years old. It's certainly coming out of me now. I don't keep much to myself at all. But when I was a very small child, I barely spoke. And if I did speak, I was very, very aware of what the adults would say when I did. And that came from being filtered by my parents, who are very loving and wonderful people. But they had their ideas of who I should be and how I should present. I think we've all had to live through parental ideas or even lack of parenting on how we should show up. And then we've all had to outgrow that and figure out how we show up in spite of those things. And so the idea of maybe us not being enough for certain circles, or not being enough to even write or sing or profess or teach or heal. We've all had to go through that struggle to get to where we are now as teachers and healers and in the fullness of our womanhood now. I think that's a big deal. I think also because we're not taught, I loved what Wendy said before about having more questions. We're not taught how to question enough. We're not taught that it's okay to be curious about each other. It's okay to ask questions and not be embarrassed by our questions and just say, look, please educate me because I'm ignorant. I'm ignorant. I think so. There's this assumption that because I'm not being asked questions, maybe about myself, or there's just not enough demonstration of curiosity in the world. There's this assumption nobody wants to hear from me either. And I think we have to outgrow that. We have to really break through that and find our niche, our home. And I love that we have so much in common, this outgrowing of childhood labels, this outgrowing of, the limited voice or limited environments we've all come from to find our healing place. Mine showed up not in any kind of illness, but in weight fluctuations that would just make you crazy. And so I would just eat my issues. And that comes in the fullness of time. You learn that food isn't the answer, but it's different for all of us. It might be disease for some of us. It might be
A combination of both.
It might
Yeah.
be compulsions of other kinds,
Yeah.
whatever. I think we all do numbing activities, and those numbing activities only last for so long, and we have to overcome them. So,
I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Marleta.
uh-huh.
As a life coach,
Yes.
there's something I do. I'm aware of it as a defense mechanism, but I also think there's a great deal of truth in it. And I would like to know what your perspective is on it. All of you actually's perspective. So
Sure.
one of the joys for me of being a crone woman, and I like that word, I don't dislike that word, is that I feel like I finally reached the point where my reason for anything is I want to or I don't want to, and that's enough. There's no other explanation that I want to because it feels good to me, or I don't want to because it doesn't feel good. And so that's an empowering thing for me to get to the point where I don't feel like I have to justify. So at the same time, I have projected that onto the world so that when I go out and ask for help, I think, well, this person either wants to or they don't want to. And that any words they say beyond that are just the excuses and justifications, but that the basic thing is, I want to. And if they want to, they're going to come up with a justification for why. And if they don't want to, they're going to come up with a justification for why. And so I actually, after I've asked you for something, if we've gotten to an end no, your reasons, I just discount them. It's like they don't really mean anything. You don't want to. Thoughts?
Yeah. I think we're all conditioned from very small to not offend, to not hurt feelings, to be polite, to be politically correct, to be whatever it is. And women get a lot more of that lumped on us than the average human being. I absolutely believe you when you say, people choose every day. One of the things I do in my coaching practice is I ask very clearly up front, what are your intentions? What do you want? What do you want? There's an entire chapter in my book. What do you want? And then I listen to see whether I believe that that's what you actually want, whether your behavior shows up with your words. And And one of the thrills I get in coaching is to actually challenge people and to show them the discrepancy between their words and their actions. And I do that in a professional, loving way, but I don't shy away from that. And I think all of us here in this Zoom room are probably very, very, very clear on that, calling out the people in our lives and selecting very carefully the people in our lives who are very clear about their yeses and nos. I was raised, let your yes be yes and your no be no, and anything in between is ambiguity or ambivalence or something that needs some work. So and that's a challenge with ourselves every day. Sometimes I'm not clear. I have to ask myself, why am I not clear? What's in the way? What filter, what expectation of someone else is in the way for me to not be clear about that right now? But I fight against a lack of clarity everywhere I go.
Thank you. Women are fighters.
Okay, I just have to say before my next question, I am loving this session. Thank you, ladies. This is so incredibly empowering. I just find it amazing that 5 women from across the world who've never ever met before can get so emotionally close in such a short space of time. And I think as women, that's one of our strengths, that we can open our hearts up to other women that we know empathize with us, have the same feelings. I just think it's wonderful. It's truly wonderful. Anyway, enough of me. Wendy, your focus is on inner healing, which obviously ties into all this. How does it play a role in you having found your voice and reclaiming your power?
Without doing the healing work, I would not have been able to go back and rescue my inner child, who was the one that was holding her tongue, who was conforming to the expectations of the family system, like you talked about, Marleta, conforming to what society expected of me as a female. And it's without doing the inner work, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for me doing the inner work. I was so hell bent on dying. Like I said before, I had, various physical illnesses, anxiety and depression. Have to spit that word out. But ever since I was 10 years old, I've consciously gone through stages where I just wanted to die. And the last one, I was in my early 50s. I didn't know if I was going to actually see my 50th birthday. I made peace with God, the universe, and went to bed and didn't think I was going to wake up the next morning. And so without doing the inner work, seriously, I would not be here.
Wow.
You have to go back and heal all that.
Wow.
Wow.
I remember when I interviewed you, I was crying.
Yeah. And Wendy, you're very brave to talk about it, because sometimes we're almost afraid to put those kind of truths out there because of what people are going to say. But I think in an environment like this, we are all totally on your side, and probably the rest of the ladies feel like I do. I just want to give you a hug, because I think a hug is the most powerful thing in the world. And since I've been on my own, that's what I miss more than anything. I don't miss the male company. I don't miss any of that stuff, but I miss the hugging. Not that he was a great hugger, but I've obviously exaggerated that in my mind and think that he hugged me all the time, which he didn't. So so I think you're very brave. Thank you. Sorry,
Well,
Lucia.
thank you. No.
Got some girlfriends who can hug you. Girlfriends can hug.
Yeah. At the moment here in New Zealand, everyone's very twitchy about COVID, because we went through the whole 2 years with virtually nothing. We opened our borders and now it's rampant, like tens of thousands of cases a day. So everybody is very twitchy. So when you kind of go to a social event, you say to people, do you hug? Because a lot of people aren't. And for me, that's awful, because my natural instinct is just put my arms around people. So anyway, Lucia, I think it's your turn. I've got you in again.
Here in Spain, everybody's hugging. I can't complain. So, Tonya, you ironically are the host of the podcast. You can say that.
Yes, that is ironic. I hadn't even thought about it myself, but yes, that's true.
Yeah. And also your website is called Get Over Yourself. And
that's my first book. That's actually my first
It's your
book.
first book. So
It's
sorry,
first
it's your
book, Get Over
first
Yourself,
book.
How to Drop the Drama and Claim the Life You Deserve.
Mm-hmm. And you advise on how to claim the life you want. So what is your advice to people to find their inner power?
You know, it's so easy. The advice is so easy, but so hard to execute. To only do what you can live with at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you're all by yourself. If every action can stand that, you can still be in congruity with yourself about what you did when you're all by yourself with no one else to bolster you and no one else attacking you, and you feel clear. To me, that's authenticity. And I think that most people, even if they don't know it or not, are spending an entire life trying to get to that feeling of I'm authentically myself right now. But it means that you have to be able to say no to everything outside of yourself. And that is a valuing of self. And for me, what that means is I feel like I'm just a vessel, and that I'm a vessel for the divine to flow through. And so when I'm creating, I don't feel like I'm doing it. I'm not thinking this up. I'm just getting out of the way and something is coming through me. I'm taking dictation. I'm being used to move or sing or dance. And that feels very empowering to me because I don't have any responsibility in that. I make my body ready. I prepare the instrument, and then I get out of the way and let something that's much bigger than me use me to do what it needs to do.
Wow, that was
Absolutely.
great advice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely probably how we all feel, certainly how I feel when I write. I feel
Yeah.
like it's not really me, it's just like, or I feel actually that someone's taken off the top of my head and 70 years worth of words are just flying out all over the place, and it's my job to quickly type them up and produce them as books. So I agree. I think we're all vessels. That's what Marleta, do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. I think there's a creative energy that's flowing to and through us, and I think we sometimes share it with each other. But I think if the ideas and the creativity are pumping through us and we are shutting those down, they're going to be pumped through someone else. And so my whole thing is not only find your voice because you are worthy to have a voice, but because there is such a universal drive for those messages to be shared amongst humanity that your sister friend or your brother friend will say them if you don't. Um, but why not you? That's my message. Why not you? Why would you shut it down? Why wouldn't you share it? But I so believe in that creative energy coming through us as vessels. I know that when I write something, magical happens unless I'm interfering with it. And I know the difference between something I tried to manufacture and something that came through me. There's a clear difference in the quality, in the response I get. There's a clear difference when I'm speaking with clients, whether I'm present. So this is in everything I do, not just writing, but in being present with clients. Sometimes they will say, that was straight from God. And I'm like, only God bless that was from God, because all I did was just start speaking things that were coming through, and it's an obedience and it's a surrender, and it's just a pleasure. And how lucky are we get to do this, to help our fellow men and women. I do help men too, believe it or not, find their voice too, because they have suppressive mothers sometimes. So sometimes they need some help too. But
Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
beautiful. And Wendy, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I absolutely agree with both of these beautiful women, 100%. With the term that's coming to me is channeling, channeling from the divine. And this is something that I came into as I was going through my healing journey. Excuse me. I was raised in a very strict religious upbringing, and I let go of my family systems, as you talked about earlier, Marleta, and I stepped into what was right for me. And what I found is when I step into that higher space, even before stepping into this space here today, grounding and asking source energy, that I call it, to speak through and to be a voice of what needs to be heard. And that way we're coming from a higher being, higher power, not from our ego. Big
Right.
difference.
Mm.
Yeah. Whew, this is fabulous stuff. Thank you, ladies.
We have to have a club.
This is so good. I need to connect with all you ladies afterwards, if that's okay. Like, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, anything, just so that I don't lose you from my life, because it's just wonderful. Anyway, enough. Tonya, you work in so many different creative fields. What's your process when it comes to writing as opposed to acting or singing?
I'm a multitasker, and I'm always working on probably 5 to 10 things at a time. And so there's a bit of the muse, like going, oh, it's talking to me. And usually it's going to talk to me about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I just have to get up and take it down, because if I don't, it's gone. It's not going to be there in the morning. If I don't, I have to be obedient to the voices coming through now. Let me take it down. And but then I like deadlines. I like false deadlines even. So if there is a deadline, a meeting, a preparation, I have a group of women, and we just meet during the week every day just to be in a space of writing together. Like, we write for an hour, and then 5-minute check-in. Did you do what you wanted to do? How'd that feel? And then we go back in. So that is my writing process. And I'm currently adapting 3 books into a series, and also writing some other movie stuff as well. So, and unfinished books. I've got about 4 unfinished books that I don't know when I'll finish them.
I want to be you when I grow up.
And Tonya, I'm there with you on that one, because I feel, oh my God, I've got to live at least another 30 years to finish all the stuff I need to do, because I've got loads of books in my head, and and then I get waylaid and other things happen, and yeah, so I'm with you totally on that. Sorry, Lucia, your turn.
No problem. And I keep threatening Pat, you better live more 50 years, because we have so many things to do. So, Marleta, I'm sure your process is different given your background. How do you go about organizing your book and courses?
So, like Tonya, I have a lot of different projects going on and a lot of different streams of income. And so I have a writer friend. He writes fiction, which I don't write. But he used to say, just get up at 5 a.m. and write for an hour. And I said, listen, first of all, my brain doesn't even work at 5 a.m. Second of all, I'm a rebel enough to know that if you tell me I gotta, I won't. So I'm just funny like that. So, but what I learned accidentally through trial and error is that I am a weekend binge writer. And it's specifically between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. because my brain isn't fully functioning awake until 10 a.m., a couple of coffees. And then it starts to get sleepy at 4, but between 10 and 4, I can almost not eat, not breathe, not do anything. And I wrote my book through binge writing 2 days a weekend, 10 to 4. There will be many people that say that's ridiculous. Don't ever do that. It's just what worked for me. And so, because I would get in the zone and it would just start flying out of me. I do get ideas at 3 a.m. though. So I validate that as that's a God thing. But yeah, getting in the zone and the rhythm and the cadence of writing is a 10 to 4 weekend deal.
Oh, I'm also not a morning bird, and I always write at night or on the weekends. Also, my brain doesn't work at 5, at 6, at 7. What about you, Pat?
Oh, well, I'm not very disciplined. I was interviewed recently here in New Zealand, and the lady said to me, "Oh, so what are your writing hours? How?" And I said, "Oh, actually, I don't." She said, "Well, what's your discipline?" She was very fierce. And I said, "Well, I don't really have much discipline." I said, "I kind of decide to do it. So I sit at my computer, then I go to make a cup of coffee, and then 2 hours later, I find myself weeding the garden." And she was horrified. "But you're supposed to be a writer." I said, "Yes, I
Makes
know, but
perfect
I have to
sense to
write
me.
when the moment grabs me is when I write." So,
Right.
like with my first book, I wrote it in 2 weeks. I just stayed up day and night because it was in my head. I had no intention of writing a book, but we'd just gone into lockdown and I was all alone. And I spent 3 weeks lying on the sofa watching rubbish on Netflix and eating too much chocolate. And then I thought, "Pat, this is ridiculous. You're a grown woman. Just get a grip. Why don't you write a book?" So I got loads of paper, spread myself out, started writing, and I was hooked. And now, less than 2 years later, I've written 5 books and contributed to 4 anthologies. So I'm just on a roll and I just can't stop. And I could write forever now, but I'm not disciplined. I'm not disciplined at all. You know, I just do it when God tells me to do it, I suppose. So that's that. Wendy, how about you with your writing process? Do you have a process?
Well, yes, my process starts off with like a 55-gallon bucket of butt glue, apply liberally, sit down in front of the computer, and then ask for divine guidance. Or, and if that doesn't work, I do what you do, Pat. I go do something else until inspiration hits. And so, like you, I'm undisciplined, but I do always need to apply that little adhesive to get myself going. And sometimes, being an unregulated person, however you want to say it, undisciplined. Sometimes I set my timer. So I play a little mind game with myself. It's like, okay, I can sit here and I can write for 28 minutes. That's less than half an hour. And next thing I know, an hour and a half has gone by. And I've, I was like, oh, wow, look at what I just accomplished. And so
that's a good idea, I think, to set yourself a time, and then inevitably you'll overrun it. Maybe I should try that tactic.
Yeah, some people suggest an hour and a half, but my brain just freaks out about that long. And so that's why 28 minutes works for me. And then I can do the 90 minutes, but it's just a psychological thing.
Right. Lucia, how about you with your writing? Because you're a very prolific author. Are you disciplined or?
No, I'm not. No. And I I have ADHD symptoms, so sometimes I just think, I'm going to get my computer and start writing. So from the living room to my room, actually, I start doing another things, and then I said, wow, I should have been writing all this time. So I'm not disciplined, but when I decide to do something, I spend the whole weekend, for example, writing. If I have to write, I'll spend the whole day writing, which is not good for my back or for other things. But I know that I have to do that. But no, definitely I'm not. And now we are going to talk about goals. So let's go with Tonya. Tonya, you've accomplished a lot so far. What are your next goals, please?
Ooh, I got a lot of it. Well, I want to visit all of the 54 acknowledged, and it's a total of 64 countries on the continent of Africa. So that's like my life has to fit around that. I got to be able to, like, whatever I'm doing, I got to be able to take that break. So I think that I said, if I can do 3 countries a year, it'd take me about 20 years to get to all of the countries. So that is like part of, I plan that into my life. I have a movie about the true story of 3 generations of women who stitched the quilt codes that let runaways be guided north. So I want to get that movie made, raising money to make that feature. I have another film that one's called Freedom Code. I have another film that I have the option on called Free to Be Us, which takes place between Brown v. Board of Education, which was integration of schools, and Loving v. Virginia, which is the allowance of interracial marriages. And it is an interracial love story about a Black boy and a white girl who both love poetry. And that is their connection. And they're trying to be the bridge, but the world doesn't allow that. And then I have this adaptation of these urban angel demon sci-fi books that I'm turning into a series. And I actually decided I'm going to hire a coach to get that done. So those are options that are, I have like 12 to 18 months to get those projects done. So those are my commitments that I've made to other people to do their work. I have a book that is probably 90% finished called The Angry Fat Black Woman Who Devours the World that I want to finish. I have another book, which is a diary of my walk in the Scottish Highlands when I didn't want to live anymore, and how that 100-mile hike, and I call it A Woman's Walk on the West Highland Way. So it's called Awe. I had this military guide who was a monster during the day, and then it was some very hot nights. So I say it's Wild meets 50 Shades of Grey. And so I want to get those done. And then I'm starting to, travel and books and movies. That's it. And I'm going to New York to do a new play it's not a new play. I'm going to New York to do the play A Raisin in the Sun by the brilliant Lorraine Hansberry this fall in New York. And we're going to have a different interpretation of it than it has traditionally been done, because the director, Robert O'Hara, asked the question, why is a play written by a queer Black woman with 3 Black women characters known to the world as a play about a Black man's dreams? So we're going to explore it in a different way. So those are the set goals for me right now.
That's a lot.
Amazing goals. And I just love the sound. I just love the sound of it all. So that's why I've got to keep in touch. So I've got to explore about everyone writing and films and stuff. Marleta, how about you? What are your goals?
Well, my first goal is to follow Tonya Pinkins. So I'm going to watch her very close. I want to read some of that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
I have a goal to write more books. I joked with Lucia when I first did the interview on the RV. I joked about my next book is probably going to be called Do Something, because and then I've got another book idea called Feel Something, because I feel like you can't do the right thing until you can even understand your own feelings. So and that may be a book of poetry. I have a set of poetry I collect and I wrote at 3 a.m. that is deeply, deeply come through me. Sometimes out of hurt, sometimes out of just needing to express an idea clearly. So I've got kind of that trilogy idea happening. I'm toying with the idea of becoming a family mediator. I'm not 100% sure about that, but family law mediator as another stream of income, because it takes the work I do in couples counseling and life coaching in general and takes it into the family to make more swift the ending of relationships for the children's sake, for the adults' sake. And I love that idea. So that's where I am. I have my 4th grandchild is on her way to the planet in November, and so I've got to get back to Australia. I have a 2023 goal of traversing the outback and going to Ayers Rock and spending a spiritual experience with the Indigenous people of Australia, who I'm deeply tied to. My ancestors fought for the rights of Aboriginal people in Australia. They were white, but they fought for the rights of Aboriginal people. And I'm deeply tied to the land in Australia, even aside from whether I married my husband or not. And I'm deeply tied to their story and their spiritual perspective on the world, having been here since time began. So I have a lot to get done. I've got a lot more travel. I've been to 30 plus countries, but I have Ireland and Scotland and like I said, more of Australia to see, more of Africa to see. I want to go to South Africa. I've been to Kenya and I've been to Egypt, and but I have so much more I want to see, so many more people I want to understand. So just a lot more living to do.
Mm-hmm. Great plans, and maybe coming to Spain as well.
Yes.
Wendy, what can we expect from you in the future?
Wow, it's hard to follow these amazing ladies. I feel like I'm a little bit of a slacker here. I have to get caught up. Have bigger goals. No, for my future, I have for a long time. I used to have the dream of being on stage with Dr. Wayne Dyer, and then unfortunately, as you know, he passed. My new big dream is to be a voice to not only tens of thousands but to millions of people, to speak your voice, to stand in your power, to heal your past, because you don't have to be a victim of your past. So I really want to be that voice on a grander scale. I'm not sure how it's going to happen. I'm just throwing that out to the universe, following wherever the path leads. As far as writing, I do have another book that I have been brewing for a few years now, and it's tentatively called Healings from the Womb, how your how your fetal self holds the power or the key to your happiness. And because what I have discovered through the healing process is so much of our angst, our inner chaos starts in the womb. We inherit our ancestors' trauma. We take on the energy of our parents at conception. We pick up the energy of our environment and our mother in the womb, and up to the first 3 days after life are really critical. And it helps to set the stage for us whether we feel safe in this lifetime or not. And I'm setting that intention, and it's just a matter of attracting the people that are willing to go in and do that kind of work. Because, first of all, the work that I do, for some people, they're like, oh my God, this is just, too crazy. You're woo woo, you're this, you're that, but it's very scientifically based, actually. And so that's something that has been a passion, and I need to move to the front burner. I had the privilege when I was living in Honolulu to attend the international film festival. And this was a few years ago. And there was a couple that made a film called In Utero, and it was all about this subject. And I introduced myself to them afterwards. And so we had this great conversation. And it was just super exciting that this is becoming more mainstream knowledge. Our cutting edge scientists are talking about this. And I want to be a big voice for this as well. Healing inside my womb was transformational for me because I had massive trauma in the womb. I had massive birth trauma, and that absolutely set me up for dis-ease, as well as anxiety and depression and other boundary issues. It was a foundation for my life. So that is really important to me. I have been pondering over the years. My daughter is 28 years old, like yours, Pat. Back when she was young, like kindergartenish, I wrote a novel, and it's entitled "The Resurrection of Abby Raines." And I gave my 16-year-old protagonist the power and the voice that I wish that I would have had. And it's for young adults, and I did it in a class led by a published author, and he said that it was actually good enough to publish. And I just didn't have the confidence, but I have shifted into that. And I like to do things for children. And so I'm going to put that out there to get that published and to help empower the younger people. The book is written, for 13 and on up. And when I was 13 years old, that's lots of, craziness happens throughout my life. But it's such a pivotal time for so many of us, going through puberty and everything, and asking who are we and all that. So those are for business wise, those are my big goals. My personal goals is just to live every day in joy. Like I shared earlier, I didn't know if I was going to wake up to my 50th birthday. And so ever since I did, every day I wake up in absolute gratitude that I am alive. And I have gone through some really rough lessons since then. And I'm in a state of gratitude for that. And I'm shifting out of the confines of that particular lesson and just stepping into joy. And I have 4 grandchildren, and in fact, I was just there babysitting my youngest one for a week, and I'll be back. And so just living every day with my family, because family is one of my top values, and just celebrating life and being alive.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I think, Lucia, can I just say that I'm very sad that we seem to have come to the end of our discussion for today, because I have just loved talking to all you ladies. Thank you so much. It's been just wonderful. But I'll pass the baton over to Lucia just to end the session.
I would like to thank our amazing guests for joining us today, Marleta, Wendy, and Tonya. Thank you so, so much for your time and sharing your precious insights. And we will have all of the information available on wordauthors.com, Brand Education, and of course on our website, www.luciamatuonto.com. So I hope you enjoyed this panel, and thank you very much.